I hope this one can. I'm gonna try and play this entire video, and hope that this can kind of like slide by Google. Let me see if I can get a little bit more. There we go. Get a little bit more light on that. Okay. Again, in Latin America, you have to have an independent means of transportation that is not reliant on a fuel supply, not reliant on electricity, not reliant on wind power, not reliant on gasoline, not reliant on hydrogen, unless you absolutely have to, do not take taxis. You can take a public, local, point A to point B city transit bus. Any transportation that requires a manifest, where the manifest is printed, collated, and originates within Latin America, and it requires that your destination is in Latin America, do not take that form of transportation. You can take a form of transportation that is like, per se, in Montreal and land in Sao Paulo, and that's no problem. You can go from New York City and go to Mexico City, and that is no problem. But the minute you go from Torreon to Cancun, that's a problem. From Cancun to Mazatlan, that's a problem. Now, you may be able to go from country to country, such as you want to go from Leticia, Colombia, and you want to go to Fortaleza, Brazil. That may be possible. That might be possible because the manifest does not originate either in Brazil, and it does not originate, it does not originate in Brazil, but it originates in Colombia. Okay, that's possible. If at any point in time you have to be on a manifest, make absolutely sure that your name is not Anglophiled. If your name is Joe Jackson, you are going to want to be Juan Perón. Try and deal with somebody that is not going to that will accept cash and that won't accept ID, and they will let you slide by with ID if you're going to travel intra-country in Latin America. Now, what you're going to see here is 92 police officers in Chiapas were detained. That's in one arrest. If you take all of the arrests of all of the police officers in the United States and Canada, and you're talking about practically 380 million people. So you take every time a police officer has gotten arrested in the U.S. and Canada, on any given day, you are not going to reach 92. So in one local area in Chiapas, they reached 92 arrests of public law enforcement officials. That's why U.S. Embassy, U.S. consulates particularly say, do not travel at night in nearly all of Latin America. If you have to travel at night, make sure it's a means of transportation that will not give an officer, a law enforcement officer, an excuse to stop you. Now, you can run, but you can't hide. Here's an example. I got a wagon. I got a wagon, and I'll make a picture of it. I got a new wagon to so that I can carry stuff, you know, and not use a car because you want to stay out of vehicles. So I got a wagon, and it was a bike wagon, a bike trailer, and I was on a practically a 15 to 17 mile round trip, and I had at least 60 pounds of food and a distillation system in the bike trailer. And I stopped by and took a microwave oven that I had found to a guy that fixes microwave ovens. As a courtesy, I told him if I ever come across one, I'm just going to take it to you, and you take it. He turned on the microwave oven, and it turned out it worked. So all he has to do is just clean it up, and he gets about 500 pesos. New, modern, high wattage microwave oven. I wish I had tested it before I gave it to him, but it turned out okay. So on the way back to the apartment, I'm dead tired. I got about less than a half a mile to go. And a well-dressed gentleman stops me, and he's practically incoherent, and he starts talking about, yo quiero por comidas, yo quiero por comidas, tú puedes darme algo por comidas. And normally, maybe I could kind of like think of something, but I'm already in spandex, so I don't have any money. I don't carry money on me. So, I explained this to him. Amigo, yo estoy prácticamente desnudo, yo no tengo dinero. I'm explaining this to him. But obviously, he figures that I got a bike, I got a trailer that looks fairly expensive, and it's something that they don't see around here. My mistake. And so he figures, man, if he's got a nice little rig like that, he's situated like that, he's got some money. So I got to explain to the guy, no, I don't have any money. So then today, a lady from Honduras, she comes and, here's somebody knock on the door. No one ever comes to visit me. Here's somebody knock on the door. It's this Hondureña, and she's with her three little adorable girls. But she's intoxicated. So she says, you know what, my little girls, they don't have any shoes. And so she goes to a pile of my shoes, and she starts taking shoes and putting them in a bag. And I'm like, hold on, now wait. My running shoes are size 13. That's like maybe 36 centimeters in the European measurement system. So I explained to her, I know I have a lot of shoes, but it's not going to do you any good to take any of my shoes, because how are you going to sell shoes this big in Mexico? And I explained to her, si nosotros estamos en Brasil, no existe un problema, no hay un problema, tal vez tú puedes vender estos zapatos, pero en México no, porque el pie de un mexicano es prácticamente mediante de mi pie. So I explained that to her. Okay, so I had some food. I gave the little girls some apples, and I took the little girls' shoe sizes, and I told the little girls to come back on Thursday, and I would have some shoes so that they could be warm. And they also said that it's cold and they didn't have coats and all of that sort of thing. So I gave one of the little girls a thermal sweatshirt. And I told her, I said, this is too big for you. It was like practically a size 48. It was too big for me. And so I told the little girl, I said, hey, take this At night, you get cold, put it on, wear it, it'll keep you warm. And if you are too cold and you go outside, go ahead on and put it on and it'll keep you warm until I can get you and your sisters some coats. Okay. So this is what I'm saying about this. What makes a wealthy country wealthy is not the existence of Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos or Donald Trump. That's not what makes a wealthy country wealthy. What makes a wealthy country wealthy is when the poorest man in the society is adequately taken care of. He's not subject. Maybe he's subject to abject poverty, but he is not subject to absolute starvation. And there was a time in the United States where you could either starve or be severely malnourished. One of the major reasons why everyone comes to the United States is because that's no longer the case. And you don't really notice it until you're in Latin America, where people actually can suffer extreme deprivation in terms of food. Extreme deprivation. So, these 92 police officers, I'm getting back to them, they're making less than 12,000 US dollars per year. They have families. They're out there dodging bullets. And I know you think that's exaggeration, but they're literally out there dodging bullets. They're putting their life on the line. And they are not, they don't have, generally, if the local police encounter the cartel, they are going to be outgunned. The cartel is going to have um, body armor, light armored vehicles, um, sometimes bazookas, 50 cals, and they're going to have radios, communication, and they're going to have worked on some tactics. And they're only going to hit the police when they know they have the absolute numerical advantage. And the reason for that is because it's very, very difficult to recruit people into the cartels. Nobody's mother wants their son in the cartel, no matter how much money they're willing to pay. It's an absolute misnomer that is stated by people outside of Mexico that people volunteer to be in the cartel. That's not the case. Recruitment for the cartel 99% of the time means that someone said, "Hey, we got a job for you. Come over. We got a job for you. Come over to the bus station. Come over to the bus station and fill out the application, or come over to the bus station, and we're gonna, and you're gonna take a short trip to the next town and apply for the job, and we're gonna pay for everything." So, so the person gets over to the bus station, and then they get sequestered, and they are forced into the cartel. That's how it works, more and more and more. Okay. So on the 92 police officers, it's the same exact thing. It's not an absolute financial exchange where they give the officer a bag of money and then say, "Hey, do our bidding." It's not like that. It's more extortion than it is direct payments to get these people originally involved. So Mary, the mother of Christ, can be extorted by Judas. I mean, she might have the best heart in the world, but I mean, she's still subject to extortion. So that's largely what goes on. Taxistas, taxi drivers, are extorted into the ranks. Custom officials are extorted into the ranks. It's not. It's not volunteerism. It's not volunteerism. I mean, that's one thing that you have to get out of your mind. Okay, now look at this and keep in mind again. Make sure that you're not in any form of transportation that can be pulled over for any reason. You may not, for any reason that you are quote unquote taken to see the judge, taken to jail, whatever, you can assume that that's not where you're going. And if you're under the assumption that they have to have cause to stop you, you are absolutely 1,000,000,000% wrong. And you are gambling that the judicial viewpoint in the United States and Canada is how justice is viewed in Latin America. It's not. It's not. Let me emphasize this. Let's say that you can't read Spanish. Number one, an officer in Mexico is not going to issue you a citation. That's number one. So you're not even going to get an opportunity to read what your infraction is. They're going to just allege that you have an infraction. That's it. That has to be the number one sign that you want no contact with a person that doesn't have a ticket book, doesn't have an ordinance book, and that is not at any point writing out exactly what occurred, when it occurred, and what violation of statute it was. You will notice that Mexican police officers and police officers in Latin America in general, that they are not armed with paper and pen. So they're not issuing tickets. They're not writing citations. They're not even necessarily writing reports. So if someone, let's say it's a legitimate stop, let's say it's an illegitimate stop, and it's just a payola stop, and you don't want to pay payola, just a payola stop, common payola stop, and so they take you to the quote unquote station because you didn't pay payola, and somebody from the cartel calls them on the way to the station, and they say, well, the person doesn't want to pay. Then the person in the cartel says, well, don't take them to the station. Just take them over here, and we're going to make them pay. Okay, that's how it literally works. So, if you don't have any Spanish before you go, don't go. You don't have any Portuguese before you go, don't go. You don't have any French in the French Department of Guyane, Martinique, or the former French colony of Haiti. You don't have any French, don't go. You don't understand any Italian, don't go to Argentina. You don't understand any German, do not go to Mato Grosso do Sul, southern Brazil, and northern Paraguay, and Uruguay. Don't go. Learn before you go. Because these people, they're hard pressed. There's no commonwealth down here. There's no commonwealth. There's no safety net. There's no nothing. You know, my neighbor, he lost his job. So I don't know what he's going to do now. There's no unemployment. There's no nothing. Now, in a lot of ways, yeah, he deserved it. He was part of hitting my car and damaging the car. Didn't even come to attempt to say, hey, we're gonna repair, we're gonna do anything. Just suck it up. Now he's in a situation where he's suffering, and then his sister, who doesn't have a job, she's suffering along with him. So then the two nephews that live with them in two rooms, the two nephews are there and they're participating in all of this suffering all together. Okay, the struggle is real. The struggle is real down here. And that's something that in visiting I couldn't fully appreciate. You know, it was highly visible in Brazil. It was highly visible in the Philippines. It was even highly visible in Korea in the 80s, but it was not at any point highly visible in Mexico because Mexico is a very, very, very wealthy country in comparison to the rest of the countries in Latin America. They may rank, I don't know where they rank in the top 10, but like per se, Brazil is ranked, I think, above Mexico in terms of gross national product. But the income distribution in Mexico is better. The access to liquidity is better in Mexico. The frequency of financial transaction is better in Mexico. And above all, the remittances that come from Mexicans who work in Canada, United States, Spain, and other countries is much greater than in the rest of Latin America. Okay, well, watch this, and you're going to see exactly what I'm saying. I mean, if you don't know, don't go. I'm going to say that again. If you don't know, don't go. Skip all of the macho stuff where somebody is talking about go and immerse yourself, which I used to say, and that was a serious mistake on my part. I mean, it's just far too complicated a thing to do unless you're armed with the language. Not half of it or some of it, or you're on YouTube battling whether or not you're fluent and all of that sort of thing. It's a question of being able to hit the ground running and being able to absolutely use the language, not talk it. Anyone can talk anything if they can control the conversation within 1 year. You can speak Swahili, Russian, Chinese, Polish, Klingon within 1 year if you control the topicality. No doubt about it. But when you get to one of the target countries, 99.9% you're going to be listening. I'm going to give another example before I let the video play. There's always some bill that's posted on the outside gate of the apartment. Like Juan Calderon. Tú deberes pagarnos 10,000 pesos I mean, every 5 minutes there's some notice out there. So the people next door says it's not their bill. I know it's not my bill because I'm nowhere am I Juan Calderon. Okay, so finally today, one of the guys that's passing out these bills, he's passing out the bill to somebody, and so I asked him. I said, "Hey, is that bill for me or is it for them?" You know. Okay, ¿cuál departamento tú quieres? ¿Tú quieres por este departamento? I pointed at my place, or tú quieres por qué departamento? ¿Cuál? And so he said to me in English, "You know what?" He said, "Not you." He said that in English. Okay, every time they hear an accent, the first thing they assume is that it's an English accent. Now you're going to say, well, that's because you have an English accent. But in this, you're going to be wrong. I don't have an English accent. I have a Portuguese accent. But if you play a piece of music in Russian to a Mexican, he says it's English. If you play Tagalog to a Mexican, he says it's English. If you play German to a Mexican, he says it's English. You play Chinese to them, they say it's English. They always automatically say English. So what I'm saying to you is that's why 99% of the time you're going to be listening, because you got a whole card. And if you run around exposing your whole card, then instead of people begging for money from you, they're going to be sequestering you and they're going to be robbing you. So you want to be silent. You want to talk to the people that you have trust in and intimate relationships with. You know, people that you see every day that care about you and care about your welfare. Those people you engage in conversation with. People who are strangers, you plain and simply listen. You don't know who they are, where they're from, what they're doing, what their intentions are. You only want to talk when they force it out of you. You're just in a situation where now you got to talk. Now you're going to say, well, okay, that's the case for you. But I'm standing on the sidewalk and I'm talking to a Haitian. And I'm speaking in Portuguese with a little bit of French, and the Haitian is talking in the patois, or in absolute French. The Haitian and I are looking around to see who is overhearing the conversation. We're both looking around. If I'm talking to otro brasileiro or brasileira, and it's infrequent here, but sometimes it does occur, he or she is looking around, and I am looking around also to see who overhears. If I'm talking to a Quebecois, and I've talked to Quebecois in Mexico, the Quebecois, he's looking around, I'm looking around, and we're trying to see who's overhearing. We're not trying to find out who understands what we're saying. We're trying to find out who is overhearing. When they overhear it and they jump on their little radios, now you got problems. They overhear it and you're in a car and you go 2 blocks and then all of a sudden somebody turns the lights and sirens on. That's our fear. That's why if you don't know, don't go. Here, check this out.
En Chiapas fueron detenidas 135 personas durante un operativo contra el narcomenudeo en el municipio de Comitán. 92 de ellas son policías municipales, quienes intentaron obstruir el trabajo de las fuerzas del orden a través de bloqueos en...
I'm not saying that I understand what he's saying. 92 are caught in this and that and the other, They're blockades. Okay, good. But I always forget to turn on these little subtitles. I'm going to turn on the subtitles. I'm not saying that anybody that watches this can read Spanish. I'm just going to turn on the subtitles for courtesy.
En calles y avenidas de la ciudad. Los hechos ocurrieron este fin de semana, cuando elementos de la Fiscalía General de Chiapas y elementos de la Fuerza de Reacción Inmediata PACAL realizaron cateos contra el combate al narcomenudeo en Comitán de Domínguez. Durante la operación, la Policía Municipal agrede a personal que se encuentre en...
Now I'm going to emphasize this again. This is in one little place called Comitán de Domínguez. One little place. 92 officers in one place. In one state.
Los encañonan, los sacan del C5, se detiene a un total de 92 policías municipales, los cuales los tenemos asegurados. Durante el operativo, se logró el cateo de 25.
No, he's saying one place, one municipality. So they're not even like regionally going to another like jurisdiction in the same area. One place, one municipality.
5 inmuebles y el aseguramiento de drogas, armas y dinero en efectivo. Ahí fueron detenidas 13 personas. Más tarde, se desarmó y se detuvo a 92 policías municipales por motín y el ejercicio ilegal de funciones. También se logró la detención de 30 personas que realizaban bloqueos carreteros para evitar el operativo.
Concluyeron el trabajo del operativo, quienes estaban, tenemos documentado, pasando información a los distintos grupos sociales para que se manifestaran. Se logró el aseguramiento de 92 personas.
En conferencia de prensa, el gobernador de Chiapas, Eduardo Ramírez, dijo que no habrá impunidad contra quienes cometan un delito o sean parte de este.
Le digo al pueblo de Chiapas que ni un paso atrás voy a dar. Voy hacia adelante. Sé que muchos y algunos actores políticos me apoyaron, pero si están fuera de la ley, les va a aplicar la ley.
Por la participación de transportistas en los bloqueos de Comitán, las autoridades iniciarán investigaciones contra líderes del transporte que podrían perder las concesiones y enfrentar delitos por sus participaciones delincuenciales. Juan Álvarez Moreno, Noticias N+.
Okay, now I'm not fully getting what the people who were driving the trucks had to do with this also. But there's some sort of blockade and a protest.
Bonjour à tous et ravi de vous retrouver. Aujourd'hui dans cette...
There's some sort of blockade and a protest, and somehow people who drive trucks were also involved in this. So, I mean, according to NAFTA, if you're a truck driver, you can drive from Polo del Norte to Tierra del Fuego. But generally, U.S. and Canadian truck drivers stop at the Mexican border and transfer their trucks to a Mexican driver, generally. And what we see in this video is one of the reasons why. Okay, so listen. If you don't know, please, 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 don't go. If you think that just because you can speak the language after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years, that means that you can hear the language, you really, really had better be sure. You had better be sure. You better be sure. I mean, so take your time. Learn this stuff slowly, whatever your target language is. Your life and your freedom pretty much could depend on it. It's not a question of sounding like a Mexican or sounding like you are a Frenchman or sounding like you're, Polish or sounding like you're Russian. That's sound isn't going to save you. It's going to be an absolute question of do you understand how the system works wherever you're going? And can you glean knowledge rapidly by reading and listening? Reading and listening. I'm going to say this again. I'm in the Philippines, and all of a sudden, I hear this song playing. Mayus ka mabuhay pagsasamo mo. And it's playing out of a jukebox. And 1,000 people that were on the street all stopped. They all stopped walking. And they all just listened to the song. Now, if I didn't understand the beauty of the song, and I wasn't starting to understand the language at that point, and I had deep resentment for the language, this is a minority language. It isn't important. Who really gives a damn? I'm walking on. And I didn't respect that everyone stopped. And I didn't respect the spirituality and the sacredness of the moment. I would have caused myself problems. So when you're disconnected from what's going on, like Vicente Fernandez dies, and you don't give a damn who Vicente Fernandez is. You don't care. He's 87 years old. Why should you care? And you don't understand that it's not the same as Tony Bennett dying. Tony Bennett could die, and his generation is dead with him, and maybe only Lady Gaga cares. But when Vicente Fernandez died, every Mexican that could talk cared. The infants who couldn't talk didn't care, but if you were 5 or 6 or 7, 8 years old, you cared that Vicente Fernandez had passed away. He was that enduring. Because what goes on in Latin America is you don't have big blockbuster Hollywood movies being produced every week. So Vicente Fernandez, who may have made movies in the 1970s, his movies are still being played. They're still popular. Everybody watches them. Everybody knows them. All of the great Mexican actors from the era of the golden age of Mexican cinema in black and white, they still have cultural cachet. So, again, if you don't know, don't go. Period. You don't know, don't go. I mean, it's only going to take you a year to be able to talk. So think of it that way. You want to go to Cancun? Take a year studying Spanish and at least be able to talk. That doesn't mean you can listen, but at least be able to talk. That takes you 1 year. I'm going to say again, that doesn't mean that you can listen, but you can talk Spanish in 1 year. You can talk Chinese in 1 year. You can talk Russian in 1 year. You can talk Czechoslovakian in 1 year. Now, you can't talk Latin in 1 year. You can't talk ancient Greece in 1 year. It's very difficult to talk Cebuano or Tagalog or the languages of the Pacific stretching to Madagascar, from Peru to Madagascar. It's very difficult to talk those languages in 1 year, and that's because the languages are not codified. But except for in like Latin America, I mean like Native American languages, languages, if there's still Laplanders, languages that the Laplanders speak. So there are some limitations to the 1 year rule. But if it's a well documented, coded language that is in common parlance, 1 year, that's all you need to speak it. But beware, simply because you can speak it doesn't mean anything. I've been a Spanish speaker for, good 20 something years. But, and I went to Mexico every weekend for 20 years. And when I would go to Mexico, the Spanish was different than the Spanish was in Texas. So it would take me 3 or 4 or 5, 6 hours to adjust to the Spanish in Mexico. And then if I went back to Texas and I was talking to somebody that spoke Spanish, it would take me time to adjust to the way Spanish was spoken in Texas. I know that sounds ridiculous. But some people don't have a delay, and they can seamlessly go from one language to the other instantaneously. Those people are rare. So you have to say to yourself, particularly if you're an adult learner, that you are not going to be able to make instantaneous transitions. You're just not going to be able to. Maybe it's going to take you a couple milliseconds, to pop up. Okay, this person is speaking Spanish. Now I'm going to use Spanish. Okay, this person is speaking Portuguese. Now I'm going to use Portuguese. Okay, this person is speaking French. Now I'm going to, think in French. It's going to take you some milliseconds. It's not going to be instantaneous. Okay, if you don't know, don't go.